for this sharing your passion for tree with us tonight. Good evening, I'm Solène, and welcome to my lecture. Tonight I'm going to talk about my travel scholarship to California. So we're going to leave the tree behind, and we're going to look at plants under 1.50 m tall, but with pretty and colourful flowers. I went to California earlier this spring to study the native flora, but I focused on one genus in particular, which is genus Calochortus in the Liliaceae family. My lecture will be around half an hour, and there will be time for questions at the end. I'm first going to give you a quick background about why Calochortus and why California. And then after showing you on the map where I went, we will go in more detail into the different species I've seen and the garden I visited. But firstly, I want to thank the following people and the funding body which helped me to organize this trip. And a special thanks goes to those three people, my guides. So Janet, Ron, and Mary. Janet is a Calochortus enthusiast, and she meets up with Ron and Mary every year to go and survey the Calochortus bloom, mainly in California. And Ron and Mary wrote the most recent monograph on Calochortus. So why Calochortus and why California? Can I just see quickly in the room, how many of you has heard about Calochortus before? Yeah, that's not a lot. Well, the first time I heard about Calochortus was 2 years ago. I was working in the woodland garden here at Kew, and I was studying this tiny bulb on the left here, which is a Calochortus bigelovii. It's in the Liliaceae family, and it flowers earlier in the spring. And reading about it, I saw that it was related to Trisiptis, which is the bulb at the bottom here. It's flowering at the moment in the woodland garden. But I also read that it was related to Calochortus. Never heard about that before. I did a quick Google image search, and I was amazed by the beauty and the diversity of those flowers, and quite surprised that I never came across it before. So I looked more into it, and there's actually 11 species here at Kew in the collection. They're in the Alpine nursery, and they're displayed in the Alpine house during the summer when they flower. But there's a total of 74 species of Calochortus, which grow from Canada right down to Guatemala and Mexico. But the center of diversity is in California. 40 species are present in that state, and 28 of those are endemic, which means they only grow there. So that's basically why I choose to go to California to hunt for Calochortus species. So you can see on the map on the left, to give you a rough idea of the size difference between the state of California and the United Kingdom. And on the right, all those numbers are the places I went. So I covered most of California with a slight footstep to Oregon. So this is 840 miles north to south. Basically, in less than 3 weeks, it's like if I went to North Scotland, right down to the tip of Cornwall. And this is why I've been so lucky to see so many different species. With the help of my guide, I recorded and named over 130 different species of wildflowers. We did some expedition, so it was mainly being in a car, driving on dusty roads, and as soon as we could spot a colorful dot, we put the foot down the brake, stopped, went out of the car, took a picture, and then back in the car and carry on. So I don't really know if I can say that I did fieldwork experience, but I guess it's kind of the American style of it. So it was still an adventure. So now the next slide, I'm going to show you all the species of Calochortus that I've seen. Ron was really keen on me to see all the ones that were blooming at that time. So I just want to warn you that it's going to be colourful and quite bright. So here you go. This is 34 different flowers, 24 species, and then some varieties, subspecies, and hybrids. So Calochortus means beautiful grass in Greek. Most of the plants are quite tall and slender, and they grow amongst meadow, but they've got large, colorful flowers. Actually, the flower shape gives 4 different common names to Calochortus. The most common one is Mariposa lily, and this flowers is a large, ball-shaped, upright flower. So this is like Vesti here at the bottom, or Venustus. Another common name is the cat's ear. So this is species such as Tolmii, Cerulus, or Coxii, because the tepals are covered with long hair. So they look like fluffy cat hair. And the third one is the fairy lanterns flowers, which is, we've got 3 examples here at the top. They're nodding flowers and slightly globe-shaped. And the last one is the star tulip, which is a small version of the Mariposa lily. So here I've got Dunii or Simulans, and at Q we've got Elegance, which is a tiny purple flower, Uniflorus, which is a tiny purple flower. So now where do they grow? Well, they grow in meadows, open ground where there's not a lot of trees, but some of them grows in the forest on the edge of the woodland, usually on sloped, really free-draining ground. On the edge of the road you can see them, but some of them grows in really odd place. For example, this pink one with the yellow center here, Plumerie, was growing in a really hot place, bone dry, under a huge power line on the side of the massive city. So it's not really a place you want to go on your own. And I was quite glad that I was with my guide. But it was a really pretty flowers to grow in such an arid and aggressive place. Another one is Westonii, here, this one at the bottom. It's only an inch tall, and it grows in a ski resort. So on the ski slope, where people ski on the snow, in the spring the snow melts, and then it gets covered with these tiny plants. It's really small, you can't really see it, you need to kneel down, but it's quite impressive, and it only grows on that slope. Then I saw this little hybrid here. So we were driving along the road, and there was Calochortus monophyllus and Calochortus tolmii growing together. It's quite a common hybrid, so we decided to stop and look for one. And I found these palish yellow flowers, so we were really chuffed about it. Took some pictures and carry on. But 2 weeks later, I got an excited text from one saying that he identified the hybrid as being with monophyllus, but not tolmii, but Cerulus, which is not an hybrid that has been recorded before. So he was really excited. The main difference could be is the hairs on the side of the tepals or not. So I suggested you could name it after me, but I'm not sure this is going to be successful. But anyway. Now this is probably my favorite Calochortus. It's one of the rarest because it's now endemic. It's really restricted. It only grows on the Tiburon Peninsula on the north of San Francisco, on the top of one mountain, just that patch, and then slightly down the slope. So it's Calochortus tiburonensis. It's difficult to see because it's the same colors of the dry grass around it. That's probably why it's been described really late. But it's really wonderful, and it grows amongst other flowers, such as the common delphinium species, which you see everywhere, here in purple. And the salt plant, which is Chlorogallum pomeridianum. This is this yellow, this white flower at the background. It's called the salt plant because the Native American used to use the bulb as salt. And the flowers only open after 5 p.m. So you can see we were there quite late. And then they would close at night and stay closed until the next day, 5 p.m. I put all those pictures here just to show you that Calochortus is a really diverse genus with different species. It's probably one of the most diverse bulb genus in the Western Hemisphere. But also within its species, it's also diverse. So you can see you can have a really pale version here And then a foot away from it, you get this one with darker marks. So that's why Ron, Mary, and Janet keeps going there, because they keep taking every single flower, because they're all different from each other. And this moves on to the next species, which is probably one of the most diverse. So all those pictures are the same species. This is Calochortus venustus, and it grows from South San Francisco right down to Los Angeles. It is one of the species that show you Calochortus could have an interest horticulturally. It's actually the one which is the most cultivated. But Calochortus is difficult in cultivation. In gardens, they've got problem with rodents eating the bulbs. And also, the plants really, some Calochortus are specific to a soil type, and they really don't like water during their dormant season. They need to be totally dry. And in pots, the bulbs tend to grow quite deep, which is quite not really easy for normal gardeners, but those deep pots are quite difficult to get or pricey. This species is quite similar to three other species. And because it's so varied, it's difficult to identify. But there is one character which is quite useful, which is the glans shape. So here you've got 4 species. Calochortus argilosus doesn't have a particular gland shape, they must be elongated, but it only grows on clay soil. So this is the glans here. And the other one goes on the same type of soil and sometimes together. So to identify them, you've got Calochortus superbus, with chevron or crescent glands here in red. Calochortus venustus, which you just saw, got square glands. So it's this orange patch here, which is really, really heavy and sticky. And Calochortus vesti, but this really pretty double chevron or M-shaped glands here. So that just shows you it's quite a stable character that you can use to identify the plants. Now, the last Calochortus I'm going to talk about tonight is Calochortus syntrophus yellowform. We went to visit a private collector, and he told us this story that he collected a bulb that had flower already, thinking it was Calochortus obispoensis. But then, a few years later, when it flowered, he got this yellow flower, which he never seen before. And looking at the characteristic of the plants, he identified it as being related to Calochortus syntrophus, and actually being a yellow form of Calochortus syntrophus. So Calochortus syntrophus is usually white, like this specimen here, and it's a rare Calochortus. So Ron and Mary were really excited about that story, and decided to go and find the site where it grows. But the description we had was just go to the Ishi wilderness, find the Ishi monument, turn around, cross the road, look down, there it is. But the Ishi wilderness is huge. The Ishi monument is not recorded on any map or on the internet. So that was tricky. So Mary and Ron went earlier that week, a trip down, took a day off work to go and see it, and couldn't find it. So when we went back at the weekend, we drove for 2 hours on this dusty road. It was starting to get a bit aggressive in the car. So I was about to say, don't worry, it doesn't matter if I don't see it. But they were really keen, so we carry on, and we found it. So we found that monument here. So Ishi is one of the last Native American of his tribe. And because he couldn't survive on his own, he came out of the forest and got captured for his own safety. And then was used for research and actually became a research assistant. But because he was not used to civilization, he died 6 years later of tuberculosis. So it's quite a sad story, so that's why they did that tiny monument. But then when we turned around, we saw that view of that bare patch here, which was covered with the yellow flower. So we were absolutely ecstatic about it. Well, they were. I didn't really understand it. And this is because we were really one of the first person to see the plant and know what it was exactly. So that was a good time. So now let's move on to other species I've seen. So I saw lots of lupinus species. They're really common in California. They're very diverse, so difficult to identify two species. It's actually an interesting plant because they're native to California, but in the north part of the state, they're considered invasive. Some species were used to stabilize sand dune and overgrown the place, so the sand dune was actually totally ruined. So it's quite an interesting dilemma to deal with when you want to take some conservation decision. An endangered plant is this one on the right. So this pretty sleeper orchid is the Cypripedium californicum. It grows only in North California and a bit in Oregon, in some tiny subpopulation of less than 10 individuals. It's really pretty and it grows in a very damp place. Its habitat is endangered because of logging and mining, because it grows on specific soil, serpentine soil. Serpentine is a specific type of rock, which you probably see in South Cornwall on the lizard pond. And it creates soil that are really low in nutrients, but high in heavy metal, so not really nice for plants. But lots of plants adapted to this environment because there is no competition. Plants don't want to grow where they're street, they don't want to grow where it's better, they want to grow where they're successful. And this was a good way for plants to grow because there was no competition from invasive. So I saw many plants growing on serpentine. So this is an example of a few of them. This was a serpentine screen that we found, and we found all those plants on it. So Fritillaria perdii is endemic to serpentine soil. It only grow on serpentine. When Fritillaria glauca is called the Siskiyou fritillaria. Siskiyou is an area in the north part of California. It can grow on different rock type, but it was quite happy there growing amongst those plants. Lewisia nevadensis is in the Montiaceae family. I saw 3 different species of Lewisia. Most of them were growing on serpentine actually. And this one is restricted to Northern America. Another one was Lewisia cotyledonis, which is quite often sold as a plant for alpine garden. And then Dodecatium andersonii is in the Primulaceae family. It's called the shooting star or the Californian cyclamen. You can see the coin here on the picture. It's a 50-cent coin, which is show you the scale of this plant. It was really difficult to see when we arrived there. It was just a pile of rock, and they started looking for stuff. And I was like, what? It's nothing. And you just realized we were actually walking on them. So we had to be really careful. Now let's move on to some oddities. So all the 3 plants are in the Ericaceae family. This is the Heather family or rhododendron. And they're a specific group, they're the monotrochoid group, which is a group of mycoparasite plants. So that means they don't use photosynthesis to get food, that's why they're not green. They use a relationship with a fungi, they actually parasitize a fungi which get the food for them. So you've got Sarcodes sanguinea, it's that big, and it's called the snow plant. This shows you the ambiguity with common name because it goes way after the snow melt. And then you've got Pleurocospora fibriolata, which is called the fringe pine sap. It's restricted to Northern America as well. And Allotropa variegata is called sugar stick. And they all grow on the leaf litter of pine forest, where, with deciduous understory. And they're really pretty, but the Sarcodes look like a piece of plastic that's been left there, so it's quite surprising. Now let's move on to the garden I visited. This is in San Francisco, right in the middle of Golden Gate Park. It's the roof garden of the Californian of Science. The building is quite contemporary. It's been designed by Renzo Piano in 2008. Renzo Piano designed in buildings such as the Shard here in London. And 85% of the roof is covered with a roof garden, not the type you would find here in London. no cocktail bar there, but it's covered with native flora. So they carefully selected 100 species of native flora that they tried there. It's really an experimental garden. The domes that you can see create different microclimates. And I went there because I heard they tried some dogs earlier the previous year. And I went there and there was a Calochortus flowering, so it was Calochortus vesti. And it's quite interesting because here they don't have the rodent issue. So it's interesting to see how this will evolve. When in San Francisco Botanical Garden, there was no Calochortus because of the rodent. So that was disappointing, but the garden is absolutely beautiful. I really love the native Californian display, which is that picture here. And it really looks like a piece of native land put in the middle of the garden. And then the ancient plant garden, which is here, and you've got a bit here, was beautiful. I really like the display, really contemporary, and some really nice artistic interpretation through it. Of course, those plants here in the UK would be in the glass houses. I went also to work in Berkeley University Botanical Garden for 2 days. So this is the pictures, all the pictures on the left. I helped them with, this is a vernal pool display. So vernal means spring. It's a classic habitat you find in California, where a pool with impermeable layer gets filled up with water at the end of the winter, which slightly dries out through the spring and then stay dry the whole summer and autumn. This creates rings of annual plants, and it's quite a pretty display to see. But because they're annual and because this is not a real vernal pool, we have to collect seeds. I also had a look at the Calochortus bulb, what they look like, which I repotted for their collection. And also the soap plant bulb, which is here. These bulbs can get as big as my head. And I had to dig some out without breaking them, which is a bit difficult. And this was for educational purposes. And then I also went next door to Tilden Regional Park Botanical Garden, which in the middle of natural reserve park, and display only native flora. So that was interesting to see. And the last garden I visited was in further south, in San Luis Obispo Botanical Garden. It's a garden that's been put up by a bunch of volunteers, and their aim was to sensibilize the people to use drought-tolerant plants in order to reduce the water usage, which is quite important in California. So they display plants from all the 5 Mediterranean climates. So you've got plants from California, plant from South Africa, plant from Western South Australia, plant from South Central Chile, and then plant from the Mediterranean basin, of course. But this garden is only 2.5 acres at the moment, and they've got a plan to extend it for over 150 acres. And this is on government-owned land, but in exchange they would have to give some plants to the government for the city. So to conclude, I had an amazing trip and met amazing people, and very grateful that I saw such a huge diversity of flowers and learned so much about Calochortus. And I definitely need to go back earlier and later to see more of this Calochortus species, because there's so much more I can see. And also to see the giant redwood, which sadly I didn't see, because I do like trees. So, yeah. Right. Thank you for listening. Any questions?